On Point is brought to you by Crow Jamaica.
A very good evening and welcome to On Point. I'm your host, Patria K.
And I'm Dennis Sean.
And we've got a lot to talk about. Lots of things happening this week, Dennis, in Jamaica. Top of your list?
Well, top of my list right now is the attack in Saudi Arabia and the significant increase in oil prices, because I think that is going to have an impact, at least short term, globally. And our number one imported item is oil.
And certainly the oil conversation having other relevance here in Jamaica, the announcement by the Ministry of Energy that it will be subsuming the PCJ, questions being asked about the future of its subsidies.
Yeah, I think it's a good move.
Yes? What does that mean for Petrojam?
Petrojam still continues.
As a standalone entity, does it now become subsumed in the Ministry of Science?
I would think as a standalone entity. I think one of the things that we missed is that the minister said that PCJ, one of the things they did is they bought the fuel, mark it up, and then sell to Petrojam, which means it's marked up twice. So if you get rid of PCJ, you can't take out a little of that.
People then ask questions. If Petrojam is going to stand alone, Petrojam is the one that needs the governance more than any other entity. And if it is that big brother Ministry of Science and Technology is going to step in and kind of take a closer look, that kind of forensic look, and hold the hand of what happens at the parent company, why would you then leave the scandal riddled? Why would you then leave the cash-rich Petrojam out there on its own?
Well, I mean, you can have the oversight, I think that the oversight should have been there. I think that what happened initially was that there was just a lack of proper management of it, but the structure was there. What they have to do is just put a good board in place, put good management in place, and I think the place will run properly.
The story that we can't ignore as well, the lightning strike.
Yes.
That happened at the football match. One of those stories where Mother Nature, you can't control.
Yeah, but I don't understand. It happened. This is something that happened in the past already, with the Manning Cup matches, and I don't understand why the protocol was not there and someone was not there to ensure that these things are looked out for.
Well, what remains unclear, rainball is allowable in the matches. What usually obtains, though, is the moment that there is the first bolt of lightning that the match is supposed to end.
And you have a thing called weather forecast spreadsheet that you can use.
I don't know whether or not they can tell you about thunder and lightning, but the question is, was that the first bolt of lightning? Was the match stopped when it ought to have? And those are the kinds of investigations that ISA must carry out going forward. Well, folks, it's a tight show. We've got a lot to talk about this week. We're starting off by taking a look at the conversation surrounding the cockpit country. That conversation has heated up in the past couple of weeks. Environmentalists versus commercial entities, the opposition versus the government. What is the future of bauxite mining in the cockpit country?
And later on in the show, we'll look at Kingston's booming real estate market. But before we do that, let's take a look back at some of the top business stories of the week.
At number 5, drone attacks on 2 of Saudi Arabia's key oil plants sent oil prices through the roof this week. Saudi Arabia said it held Iran directly responsible for the attack. This saw the immediate escalation of tensions in the Persian Gulf amid a standoff between the United States and Iran. At number 4, Haiti came to a standstill on Monday with no public means of transport available. Banks, government offices and schools were closed amid protests over a fuel crisis in the country's capital, Port-au-Prince. Protesters demanded that the government resolve the fuel crisis, which had lasted for over 3 weeks. The government owes fuel suppliers about $100 million in past payments, and so suppliers have refused to deliver petroleum products. At number 3, Jamaica has fallen 7 places in the latest edition of the Travel and Competitiveness Report. The country is now ranked at 76th out of 140 nations. The Travel and Competitiveness Index measures Jamaica's overall appeal as a tourism destination, along with the ease with which locals and foreigners travel in and out of the island. At number 2, amid concerns about slowing global growth and trade wars, the U.S. Central Bank has cut interest rates. The Federal Reserve lowered the target range for its key interest rate by 25 basis points to between 1.75% and 2%. However, officials were divided about the rate cut and over the need for future cuts. 7 members of the Federal Reserve Open Markets Committee, which sets the rates, voted in favor of Wednesday's cut. 2 members wanted to hold the rate steady, while 1 wanted to cut further. And at number 1 this week, the Jamaican government forked out some $1.2 billion to buy back a portion of the country's foreign debt. The buyback offer tendered by the government was worth $3 billion. In addition to the buyback offer, the government also floated a new bond which raked in $815 million. Both transactions formed part of a refinancing plan aimed at replacing expensive external bonds with cheaper debt.
When we come back, mining in the cockpit country, where exactly are the boundaries? We'll talk about it on the other side of the break. Welcome back to On Point. Now, this matter of mining in the cockpit country has been a hot button topic, but those discussions have intensified over the past few weeks. Take a look.
The Holness Administration and the Noranda Bauxite Company are adamant that there is no mining taking place inside the protected boundaries of the cockpit country. But environmentalists and Jamaica's political opposition aren't buying it. The environmentalists are contending that mining should not be allowed in the adjoining sections of the cockpit country protected area. They say from an environmental perspective, bauxite mining is not sustainable, nor is it good for the environment. Meanwhile, Noranda Bauxite is insisting that there is no bauxite mining taking place in the protected areas of the cockpit country. The St. Anne-based bauxite company says there have been rumors that it is seeking to mine heritage areas such as Maroon Town and Accompong, but those claims are totally unfounded. The company argues that in order to maintain needed bauxite reserves for its long-term sustainability, it has applied for permission to mine an area outside of the protected area described as Special Mining Lease 173. In the meantime, the opposition People's National Party journeyed to the cockpit country this week to have its own consultation with stakeholders there. The move saw opposition leader Dr. Peter Phillips meeting with Noranda bauxite workers who expressed their fear that the opposition's advocacy may see the plant being closed and them being left unemployed. The cockpit country mining pushback culminated this week with a march on Parliament by activists who say their aim is to protect the area.
Joining us now are Sustainable Development Specialist Robert Carr and David Wong King, Director of Strategic Planning at Noranda Bauxite Company. Welcome to On Point, gentlemen.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Evening.
Let me perhaps start with you, Robert. Articulate the challenge that you have with where things are now with regards to mining in the cockpit country.
I think that there is a kind of bottom line that the residents and the people who live in the area and persons concerned with development understand. That bottom line is the services that the cockpit country provides for Middle Jamaica of, I would say it's the #1 shield against disaster impact because it controls this high altitude water. It's also the area where our genetic resources are unique and special. And we understand that between people and nature, those two things are the greatest multipliers of wealth. So there's a bottom line. We want to make sure those services of water management and water regulation, carbon sequestration, that's carbon, containing the carbon from our atmosphere. Those are critical functions. In addition, people live there. People live and survive from the land. The last time we had a big separation of people from land, it wasn't good. And it brought us to this side of the world.
When was that?
Slavery.
Oh, that's a long time ago, man.
People will live in it now. So, to cut a long story short, the bottom line is that the cockpit country, as described by its own character, it's a karst limestone area. You don't bother it, it bothers itself, right? And so those services is what people are saying need to be maintained. There is a disagreement about the boundary.
Yes.
To be responsible, you have to decide if you have a core area, what do you need to make sure you manage those services?
But what changed? Because when the boundaries were in fact announced by the Prime Minister, there was a round of applause. People were happy. There was cheering.
Including
Fast
environmentalists.
Forward months later, and people are no longer happy. There is displeasure. What changed within those
months? The big change was that the boundary that the stakeholders and the scientists proposed incorporates the communities. The protected area incorporates the communities, and it incorporates that land characteristic and the services that it provides. Now, the boundary which was announced by the government is an area much smaller, and it excludes areas that people live in and are parts of the cockpit country, areas that carry out that service.
I want to introduce David in the conversation at this point because we're hearing about a boundary seemingly that was agreed upon through consultation, and according to Robert, a smaller geographical area that was, or larger, I'm not sure, geographical area of protected area, a smaller protected area that would have been announced by the Prime Minister. Is that how you recall it?
No. My understanding of the situation is that for decades, the country has grappled with where the protected area ought to be. And in that discussion, several boundaries had been proposed, as much as 11, I understand. Some by stakeholders, some by the University of the West Indies, others by environmentalists.
Did Naranda have a say?
No. Naranda would not have been a participant in where the boundaries ought to be. Jamaica Bauxite Institute would have represented the bauxite and alumina interest. And their boundary, I think, had been the smallest for the protected area. So the government consulted widely. They took into consideration all the boundaries. They held meetings. They consulted with scientists. And then they came up with a boundary that they thought would be a good balance between the environmental concerns and the economic.
And Robert, I want to talk to you about that because I was a part of those consultations because I was at the PSOG at the time.
Okay.
And we did call for the government to define the boundaries. And I know that consultations took place widely. So my question to you then is, weren't the environmentalists involved in the consultation at the time? And then I don't understand now if you agree then, why disagree now?
Well, I'm of the same mind as you. It is my understanding that the environmentalists were in fact involved and did in fact agree on the boundary.
Okay, no, we have to
set the record straight. Absolutely.
Let's set the record straight. The stakeholders recommended several years ago what the boundaries were, based on their discussion with the community people, based on their scientific investigation. That boundary includes areas, northern, northeastern, central, and it includes, it's clear they have presented a boundary, which they did so on the basis of the services and the fact that people live in those areas. You can't be mining where people live. It was a much larger boundary, right? They put a boundary that would allow for management of the services that the cockpit country provided. What was announced was as a protected area,
right,
was a much smaller area, and adjacent to it, immediately separated only by a road, was a mining lease. No, I am 25 years involved in protected area management. When we do a protected area, it is a process that looks at all its interests, stakeholders. and we have to put a buffer area.
Yeah, but Robert, I'm not disputing that. You know what I'm saying is that I cannot understand why there was an agreement.
No, there wasn't.
No, I'm telling you, because I was involved in the process. And I know when an agreement
with boundary here, no?
Of course.
With the boundary,
of course.
What I'm hearing is that the boundary that was
they
announced
presented a boundary.
That was agreed.
They presented a boundary several years ago, which is the boundary that they are arguing now. And they presented a boundary based on the factual knowledge of what is karst limestone.
So
what has been announced is different from what they are supporting.
If it was announced a few months ago, and nothing, and nobody said anything.
No,
then
why? No, immediately it was announced. People said that cannot work. So we have to get the facts straight. The boundary, what the people presented several years, not recently, you know.
Yes.
And even the university boundaries, these were larger areas because they know that you can't mine here and have a protected area. The breeze, you can't tell the breeze where to blow the dust, and you can't manage that on the water system. You need a large. We did the Blue and Jonquil Mountains National Park. The buffer area is several kilometers.
So let me talk about the reality of bauxite in other locations that might support what we're hearing.
But I don't agree with what has been said.
And perhaps you cannot disagree by answering my question. If we look at what's happening in Maine, the people of Maine, the residents are talking about chronic issues, health issues, respiratory issues. The bauxite company there is having to shell out money to be able to pay medical bills for the people who live in the community. These are things that they are not able to control. Does that Maine experience give credence to what you're hearing our environmentalists say or protection
But
specialists?
Why is it that you say that these are things that are not capable of being controlled?
Well, it's not being controlled in Maine.
It's not being controlled, but that's not to say it cannot be controlled. Mm-hmm. So yes, mining has some adverse consequences. No question about that. You can't avoid that, right? The country has to decide whether it wants a mining industry or not. If it wants a mining industry, some adverse consequences will follow. We mitigate against them as best we can. We're not always successful, as might be the case in Maine. Second thing is, to your specific input, do not compare Noranda bauxite with a refinery. Right. Noranda does not refine bauxite. We use no caustic soda, for instance. So one of the misinformations in the public domain is that Noranda has contaminated the water and the land with caustic. We don't use caustic. We're not a refinery.
Nobody said that.
It's in the public domain, Robert. It's in the public domain.
They're not arguing that.
Why are we haggling over the square footage of protected area? Would it matter to Noranda if that protected area geographic domain was increased? Would it matter significantly to your bottom line?
Yes.
Tell me how.
Absolutely. One of the things that is consequential on the existing protected area, the 75,000 hectares of land that now comprise the protected area, is that it sterilizes over 260 million tons of bauxite. That's 40 years of mining. Okay? The wider you make that boundary is the less bauxite that you have to mine. You will not hear the bauxite companies argue that 260 million tons of bauxite has been sterilized. You won't hear that because the government has made a decision and the bauxite companies abide by it. We don't quarrel over it. Of course we would want more bauxite, but if the government says, hey, this is what you have because it's in the best interest of the country, we understand that.
So if you give them the protected area that they want, this project is no longer profitable or attractive to Noranda?
It may not be viable. And the issue is you have induced people to invest money based on what you say they have the ability to mine. No. You've given them an area with a certain amount of bauxite.
So therefore, Robert
has a clear choice.
Yeah, but Robert, I'm coming to that choice when I ask this question now. All right? I have always believed that, and I'm playing devil's advocate with you, right? that one of the greatest negative impacts on environment is poverty. We see what happened in Haiti, right? We see what happened with Goat Island,
no.
right?
You're wrong about that, though.
What, poverty is not a negative impact?
You're wrong. You said the greatest negative impact. I
said one of the greatest negative impacts.
Well, I will tell you, when you destroy the water management system in the middle of Jamaica, remember I'm talking about 40 rivers and streams and outlet, 40% of the island's water system, right? You can't tell me that if you understand how the carpet works, once you start to open up the forest and change the humidity, change the environment completely. Secondly, the water systems are going to be impacted by mining because they're mining in the volcanic depressions, they're mining between the hills. That is the water system.
So you're saying that
permanent generational damage.
You're saying that the government and their technocrats don't know what they're doing when they define the boundaries.
No,
they're a set of incompetent people up there.
It's not about knowledge. Many years ago, when they were doing the ponds, the Red Mud Lake, they knew that if you don't line the bottom, it's going to travel into your water system. Hold on a little. Understand the point. It's not about. It's about the choice that some companies make, right? Are you going to put people's well-being and interest first, or are you going to put your capital investment first?
Are you calling the government greedy?
Right? I'm just describing to you that many people have been negatively impacted by the operations of bauxite.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, Robert, is the answer I want from you. Are you saying they're incompetent or they're greedy?
No.
The government?
There are other choices. Before I go to malice or anything, right? I'm saying that the interests of the people are not being put first. That is what I'm saying. I'm saying, so I can't say the government is greedy.
Because they're greedy.
I don't want to use that word. That would be your word.
Which word you prefer?
I need to respond to this.
Yes, and I need to hear. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that the government is not putting the interests of the people first when they do
I need to respond to this. Go ahead. I need to respond to this. Basil Fernandez, well recognized as the foremost
water resource
expert in the island, has declared that 50 years of bauxite mining has had no adverse effect on flow or quality of water.
That's not true. I have documentation. I did a South Coast Master Plan, and one of the problems, Kirkvine water travel from Mandeville almost to the south of Clarendon. We know. That is why they now have to seal the thing. Then you have people who have respiratory problems. Then you go to the meeting, people show you they have to put cancerous things out in their neck because of the effect of these things.
How do we strike the balance? Are you open to bauxite mining anywhere in the parish?
You see, you have to be very responsible. If you have a water system that is decisive for the future of the country, and you have a system of topsoil that is critical for production in the middle of the island. Remember now, you have a lot of industries on the coast now, all them tourist industries on the north and agriculture on the south.
And so I get the objection. What I want to understand is, are you open to bauxite mining anywhere?
I'm going to answer you now. For you, if your bottom line is to preserve those services, right, then you have to do the scientific work to say what is required to make sure.
But they have done that.
Stop a little. Is to do the scientific requirements to show what is required.
So that has not been done.
For protected area management, no.
So therefore, you're saying that if it hasn't been done, what you're saying is that the government was and their technocrats were incompetent in what they did.
Irresponsible. I'll give you an example. You can't issue a special mining lease 1733, and your EIA has not been done. To me, that is reckless and irresponsible. Environmental impact assessment. Okay. That was not done. There's a process where you do that, and then the stakeholders have a chance.
But you're saying it was done.
This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous.
It's not done.
The SML bylaw certainly can be issued. What cannot happen is you cannot mine until the EIA has been done and approved by NEPA.
So
that is to come.
That is to come.
No, but to me that prejudices the case.
You take that on.
Yes.
You don't issue a lease until you should not. Because NEPA stopped. Remember, it's not only that NEPA stopped the mining activity. Am I wrong or am I right?
You're wrong.
They didn't issue a stop order?
You're wrong.
do? What did they do?
We have not begun mining in SML 173.
No, what did they issue a stop order on NEPA?
I don't know that.
Let me go down the road of this environmental assessment. Let us say you do this environmental assessment, which I have a difficulty with because you have no...
You have an interest.
You have an interest. You have a vested interest
Yes.
in the economic activity and making this thing happen. What assurances do the people of Jamaica have that your disclosure will be full and complete and in the best interest of the nation?
You have NEPA, who is a regulatory body.
So they review.
They review and mandate what you have to do.
No, that's what everything.
That's what
but
they
there
do.
is to be a
So what
public...
Robert is saying is he has no confidence in the government that they've done the scientific work. He has no confidence in NEPA that they will regulate properly. That's what he's saying.
What I
Robert.
said is in terms of a protected area management, we have not seen presented what are the requirements to sustainably manage the area. For example, if that was done, you couldn't use a road as a buffer zone between mining. You can't be mining on one side of the road and then you have a protected area on the other side.
Perhaps you should wait. What if you wait for this environmental assessment and the plans?
Wait in terms of what?
I'm saying perhaps the protest action at this point is premature because if they are mandated to do an environmental assessment that is to be monitored and managed by NEPA, would you be comfortable if the plans that are put in front of you take into consideration the future watershed issues, the future supply of...
But they've already determined where 173 is.
Yes.
And if you put mine in there, it's going to destroy the service.
Anywhere in there.
Robert, let me ask you this.
173.
Robert, let me...
Mining is happening in the cockpit, you know.
Robert, let me ask
let me
ask it this way. Let me ask it this way. You said that the government, in your words, is irresponsible in the way they have defined the boundary, right? And the process.
The process.
Right? Let me ask you now. You said that it's going to cause a problem. What is the basis of your opinion then?
Okay. The functions, the services that we get from the cockpit.
You did a scientific study.
Right? The services that we get from it. It's been well documented. Right? And he knows the information.
No, I don't. Don't presume that.
No,
I go by science and I go...
That's what I'm saying, the reports. There have been several studies.
Which
University
report?
and the Dale Weber report. And then there are several documents.
Dale Weber's report says that the environmentalists agreed to the boundaries.
No.
That's what Dale Weber's report says.
Well, he can say that, but it wasn't agreed to. And it's a different boundary from what they have proposed.
So you're conveniently agreeing with Dale Weber on some things and disagreeing with him on others.
I'm agreeing with him on the points that it has to do in terms of the functions and services that cockpit country.
But
remember,
but as David said, does he have points in there that you disagree with in the report?
No, but that's...
No, I'm asking because I want to know if you agree with half right and disagree with
No, I'm telling you the points that are important. When you have a protected area, right, the services that we're talking about has to be tied to the terrain, the topography of the area. There's a certain topography. You know where the cockpit country is based on the topography, right? And the services are tied to the topography. So when you put mining lease adjacent and into the inside of that topography, you're going to have an impact on the water system. That's just how it is. So the people secondly, you can
but Robert, I'm asking what's the basis of that? What's the basis of that? Because if you're going to say that government has been irresponsible and not competent,
I give you an example of what was irresponsible.
What is the basis? Is there a report that we can go to?
Yes, you can go to all the hydrological.
What's the name
I'll
of
give
the
you an
report?
example. There's a report that was done which showed you all the hydrological points in it.
By who?
It's in the forest. It's in the forest report. It's in Dale Weber's report. It shows you.
That's not what the National Water Resources people are saying.
It shows you. I'm not discussing this. I'm telling you what's on the map. It shows you all the caves and all the water systems, and many of them are outside of what is proposed as a boundary. Now, if you understand the cockpit, I'll give you an example. Quashy River Sink, or Darnack said in this case, is the source of the Rio Bueno. That is going to be impacted by the mining.
No. Dornoch is outside of the CCPA.
No, allow him.
But it is not within the mining lease.
Listen to what I'm saying. I'm saying that the areas that are being mined drain into Dornoch. From Fremont, all of that area there drains into the Dornoch. You see, what happened in the high altitude area have all of these drains, Black River, Martha Rio Breno, right? They connect from the center to the coast. If you impact those channels that have been defined by millions of years of flow, right? What is going to happen? You could be caught in disaster.
What happens if you don't stick to the environmental protections that you ought to? What if he's right and we see bleed in some of our river waters?
We are constantly monitoring.
You can't correct.
When you mine,
you can't correct. That's
Robert,
I'll allow you to answer.
Robert's
comments
are largely emotional, and I understand that. We have to deal with science, and we have to deal with science, not because we want to bulldoze down the place, but this country needs the jobs and the revenue that bauxite produces.
But we need water, and it's already
So
short.
let me go further. There are 13 riverheads. All 13 are within the CCPA. All
protected
13
area.
are within the protected area. Not one is outside.
Those are the heads of the river.
Yeah,
what
Dornoch
of the rest
is outside
of the river?
It's groundwater. There's no river. There's no surface river anywhere in the mining lease. Neither 165 or 173. There is no surface water.
I'll give you the last word.
Hang on.
Okay, all right, no. And I don't want to allow you. Yes.
Hang on.
Groundwater?
50 years of mining. Basil Fernandez says there is no evidence that the water has been either qualitatively or quantitatively affected. Reynolds mined above the Duns River. No evidence. So I don't know, other than an emotional task. I don't know where the scientific
The people who live in these areas will tell you that they have lost water quality. They can't build in some areas. No, remember, the area that is proposed in 173, people live there, These are communities, long-established communities. Plus, you're going into maroon territory. People live there, so what are you going to do with these people?
Bauxite has a history of relocating people, though.
But what happens to when you move somebody from their land, separate them from the land, you put them into an area where they can't produce. These lands no longer can produce. In fact, right now, this is not a money issue, because right now there's a 1.9 billion annual exemption under the bauxite levy. Why is that money not coming to us? How you can do it in a country where you don't have beds in the hospital?
Not sure.
This discussion certainly needs a part two. Yes. Gentlemen, we thank you for your time. Robert Carr, David Wankin, thank you very much for talking.
You're most welcome.
We take a break, folks. When we come back, it's more on point. Welcome back to On Point. Forget house and land, apartments, that's where it's at. But is there an oversupply of apartments in Kingston? Take a look at some of the more recent developments.
The face of Kingston and St. Andrew is changing. That declaration came from Prime Minister Andrew Holness last October as he opened the brand new 10-story apartment complex called 20 South. The apartment is near halfway tree in St. Andrew, and the government says it fits seamlessly into the administration's plan to change the corporate area's skyline. At 10 stories high, 20 South is the tallest residential complex in St. Andrew. But there are already requests from developers to build high-rises up to 20 stories. Few months after 20 South was opened, the Guardian Group forked out $4 billion to invest in its own apartment complex called the Cambridge, which has 176 units. The Cambridge is being developed on 3 acres of Guardian Life's property on Musgrave Avenue and is located in the prime residential area on the outskirts of the Golden Triangle. Ground was broken in March 2019, and by mid-April, half the units were already sold. It's not only private private developers who are contributing to reshaping the Kingston and St. Andrew skyline. The NHT is also involved. The Ruthven Towers apartment complex, which is being built by the trust, has already racked up a bill of over $5 billion. When completed, the complex is expected to have some 238 units.
Joining us now to talk about trends in the real estate market is Realtor and past president of the Realtors Association, Edwin Wint. Eddie.
Sir Wint, good to see you.
Yeah, man, good to see you.
It must be really good to be you right now with all the developments going up. Realtor is the dream job at this point, no?
Don't listen to all the rumors you hear.
but it's good, right? It's good.
The market is buoyant, yes.
But let's talk a little bit about the actual pricing of some of the things that you're seeing. Are they value for money right now? Are they overpriced?
Okay, the market is wide, 14 parishes. So if we're talking about corporate area and you want to narrow it down, you do have some good value for money. But some of the new builds are priced at a bit of a premium. One has to be discerning and look at it carefully.
Let's talk about where the value is right now. If I'm supposed to find a property in Kingston that's a steal, that's a good buy, what would that look like?
That would look like maybe something over 10 years old, maybe a townhouse in an area that's maybe not as well sought after right now, but it's still a good, stable location. And you're still finding properties that have immediate equity in it.
And you have that kind of inventory on the market now?
You do have a few, but they're very scarce.
But Eddie, there's still a significant demand at the lower to lower middle income because we've had a significant shortage over the years. Eh?
Yes.
So I mean, what you might find is that a lot of the people who were first-time owners, they're now trying to step up, and then people are trying to fill that bottom slot.
That's true.
But on that vein, what does that mean? Poor people shouldn't live in Kingston. At some point, we're not going to have any housing in Kingston that's going to be affordable to middle-income, poor people.
Well, that's for the government to answer. But the private sector developers are responding to the market, but the land price predicts where you can build what. Right. And so they're finding that they have to move out of the central areas in order to get the land price, which can afford the selling prices. So you're talking Old Harbour and moving out St. Catherine's side.
I have to push back on that point. I have to push back on that point because plots of land that traditionally were single-family dwellings, maybe double. Yes? One of those Meadowbrook houses that have a small side and big yard space. A lot of those developments, a lot of those houses are being turned into multiple unit developments, 4 stories high, 30 units. A developer can recover the cost of that land if he's able to do something affordable on that, no?
Well, what is happening is that they're bidding up the prices now. Now that the Provisional Development Order has increased the densities, so there is more competition in the market for the available lots.
Repeat what you just said. There's now a mandate to increase density?
There is a change in there's a Provisional Development Order. And in that Provisional Development Order, some of the densities most of the densities in the corporate area have been increased.
The allowable
densities have increased.
So whereas at one point, say 5 years ago, you couldn't put a 30-unit apartment complex on one of these single-unit lots.
Legally.
But you can do it legally
now. You can.
Yes, in principle, yes.
But Eddie, there's something wrong with that, you know. I mean, my view is that if you go to cities like Tokyo, you know, Hong Kong, New York, even New York, right? You're going to find that within the more prime areas, you're going to have these high-rise buildings, right? And the rooms are, and the places are very small. one of the challenges that we have, right, is that we have failed to develop the highway to move out of the town. So it makes it look like a bother for people to get into Kingston. But I mean, there's nothing really wrong with that, because 60% of the population live here anyway, so you expect demand to go up, isn't that so?
Yeah, in principle, yes.
So people are moving away from wanting a yard and somewhere for the dog to run and 2 mango trees in the back to go for an apartment.
But I don't think it's not people don't want a yard, you know, Patria. It's just that people can't afford it.
I want it. That's what they're trying to figure out.
Well, what they're doing is moving out of the corporate area to get that.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're going to find more of that happening.
And you find that happens in major cities also.
Correct.
I mean, in New York, for example, you know, come back to that. You know, there's a concentration of high-rise buildings and, you know, that sort of thing. If you want a yard space, you move out.
Let's go back to that price matter. Who can afford some of these listings? I mean, you look through the real estate listings, you know, ads in the paper, or you go on a website, go on the MLS. You see a matchbox, and the price for that matchbox, you're thinking, surely nobody can afford this. And then you go back and you see it's sold. Who is affording these luxury apartments?
A cross-section of people. You have regular hardworking people who are moving up on the property ladder, selling something.
Like a kidney?
And moving up. Pardon?
Like a kidney?
Not sure I understand.
Selling something like a kidney.
Oh.
Because what would you sell to be able to afford the price point at which some of these are being sold
what
for?
you're doing is you're selling, maybe you might have cleared the mortgage or a substantial amount of the mortgage. And so you're getting a certain amount of principal to put deposit on the new one.
So you're benefiting from the appreciation in the real estate market with your existing property.
That's correct.
Fair.
And also, you're more joint purchasing.
Right.
So accessing the NHT benefits and pooling together to make these investments. Auntie and Granny, you know, from who is in foreign, all pitching in. So it's a mixture of people that buy.
On that matter, the NHT though, did you notice in your experience that when the changes were made to the limits of the NHT, that sort of helped the market to get more active? Yeah,
there was an uptick. There was an uptick in the market. There was also an uptick in values in that range. Because 6.5 times 2, 13. So you found that anything that was valued maybe at around 10 to 11
went to 13.
Moved to 13. That's just how the market moves.
And let's talk about those numbers, because the interest rates are doing a great thing. There's apparently this race to the bottom. We can all recall when we had double-digit interest rates for housing. Now we're down to as low as what?
6.99.
In commercial banks.
Yes.
But as the interest rate is coming down, the prices are going up.
Yes.
Are we still able to achieve that balancing act where a modest salary for even 2 people can find housing in Kingston City, in the capital?
Right. What they have to be doing is changing their expectation. So they can't afford what they would have wanted to before, but they're finding something else in the market that they can afford.
Or going outside of Kingston.
Or going outside of Kingston.
And with the highways being developed now.
That's correct.
I mean, like for example, look at an area like Caymanas. Caymanas, a beautiful scheme, and the demand is there. I mean, that's where a lot of people would love to live. They have yard space. And
lots of developments also going up in Old Harbour. People are hitting the highway.
And there are lots of plans for more housing in the Caymanas area.
Let me ask, can we take more? And I particularly have a difficulty with the infrastructure side. Water. NHWA can collect more garbage from all of these townhouses that are going up. Well, are we able to keep up from the infrastructure side with all of this high density, intense, multi-story living?
Well, that's what we have a government for, to make these kind of plans, forward planning, to ensure that everything is in sync. You'll find that, speaking of infrastructure, the road improvements that's stated, which will commence going on the St. Thomas side.
Right.
That's going to drive another opening up of opportunities, because when it reduces the commute time and the wear and tear in your vehicle to get there, that's where the action is going to be in the next 2 years.
And there's a lot of undeveloped land out to that area.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Where do you see the next 5 years in real estate? What's going to be hot? So you talk about St. Thomas. Is real estate still going to be a best bet for your investment dollar 5 years from now?
Well, the realtor will tell you that real estate will always be the best investment. And I'll just go back maybe 10, 11 years when you had a meltdown in the US property market, and we never had that experience. So our market is fairly resilient, our economy is fairly resilient, regardless of how bad it gets. You'll probably have a slowdown, but certainly not to the point where prices start dropping and you get a negative equity in your investment.
That will never happen.
No, I never said never.
And this is what I'm asking.
Yes.
This is a reality in some US states,
yes,
where you might buy a house today and sell it in 5 years for less than you bought it for. You just take the best amount that you can possibly find. With the increasing Jamaican real estate price, do we run the risk of bottoming out on the price of these apartments and getting to a place where people say, I will not pay that anymore, and we start having to sell for less than we bought for?
Depends on what you bought for.
Yeah.
And you should know when you're buying to use your realtor and to get your comparative analysis to know what's happening in the market, and don't go for above what the market should be.
But right now people are paying more than valuation.
Well, I think that's the point you're making, that
yes,
a lot of people buy based on emotions,
yes,
and if you don't go to your realtor,
yes,
then you don't get the
But purely out of desperation, if you know you want to live in Kingston 6, people are willing to pay more than the valuator comes back and says, this thing is really worth X. But because the inventory is small or extremely pricey, people are paying more than valuation amount.
Okay, and that's risk. So you're willing to take the risk and you do it.
But the other thing though, Eddie, I mean, I hear that there's a difficulty selling things at the high end, the very high end. But the low end, where the demand, we still have a lot of unfulfilled demand. And I think that's why the real estate market didn't take a hit like the US. But the other thing I wanted to think about, when I did some comparisons the other day, even when people said that prices were going up, in US dollar terms, they were the same thing.
Well, I was gonna answer your question about that, to say sometime in real terms, especially because we do valuations as well.
Yes.
So we have found that if a property was valued in US, maybe said 8 years ago, in some locations, and because of the movement of the exchange rate, I've seen where when they're ready to sell, they have to sell for less than the amount in the US at the time. But in J dollar equivalent, they'll be making a fortune.
Right.
I take it back. The realtors aren't the ones who are making the bring stroke of money. It's the developers. We hear a conversation that those are the ones who are making supernormal profits. Are they taking home a wad of cash? Can they build for, can they sell for cheaper?
That's a difficult question, because it comes back to how efficient, and you start from the land cost. Because sometimes they overbid in expectation for the land. In fact, sometimes they land bank. And so they buy it for 5, 10 years in advance.
And hold it.
And hold it. But there's a cost for holding, and so they want to recoup for that. Because if you wait until you need it, you won't have any. So some of them land bank, and so they have to, in order to keep that supply chain going, they have to do some creative things as well.
Very interesting.
Yes.
We thank you for talking to us. There's a lot more for us to figure out with this real estate market. You know more than we do. We take a break. When we come back, we continue the conversation right here on Point. Welcome back to On Point. The cockpit country is home to much of Jamaica's endemic flora and fauna. It's also the source of much of our water. Take a look at the numbers.
According to the Water Resources Authority, 28% of Jamaica's safe water is from the cockpit country, along with 31% of unused water resources. Over 150 plant species have been identified in the cockpit country, of which 101 are endemic to the area. There are over 500 species of ferns in the cockpit country, more than any other rainforest in the tropics. Approximately 550 species of land snails have been identified in Jamaica thus far, with most occurring in the cockpit country. The cockpit country features 27 of the 28 known remaining endemic bird species in Jamaica and 79 of the 100 total species identified on the island. At least 94 of Jamaica's 125 butterflies are found in the cockpit country, including all endemics. There are 2 butterfly species endemic to the cockpit country. The area represents the last refuge for the 18 species of native frogs on the island. All 7 species of snake in Jamaica are found in the cockpit country.
And our on-point team hit the streets and asks, do you think any mining should take place in the cockpit country?
I don't think so, because we really need the trees to get more rainfall in our country, and I believe cutting down the trees will stop all of that.
Well, if there's anything that we can make out of it, don't want to go into reserve part of it, but if there's anything that will be available to us, yes, I think so.
No, I totally don't agree. One is the watershed conservation area. I don't think there is enough control or parameters set to sustain and prevent contamination. Evidence is in St. Elizabeth, where persons currently living there are having health issues. I don't think the financial benefits outweigh the natural resources or the benefit to the human resources either.
If it's beneficial to the economy and if it doesn't bother any surrounding communities, that would cause a problem in the future.
Hell no! Simple as that. Allow the people them place. See what I say? Either that or you do all that you need to do, that the feasibility study about it, everything, go in and speak to the community. Can't go in at the people in place yes and no man and dig out. When you dig it out and you don't dig it out, nothing more can grow there, you know. I know people know that. So anywhere that you mine, nothing else can grow there after when you're done. So what you gonna do with the people in place? No man, it need more investigation, it need more, have a bit more knowledgeable in making them this decision there. Draw back that license there where whoever have it. That for draw back man and make we examine the thing good man. Come on man.
As far as I understand, it's not going on in the cockpit country. You have boundaries for mining. So therefore it provides jobs for people. So I don't see why it should not happen.
I don't think I'm adequately informed as to the ramifications of doing such thing. I know mining is very important to Jamaica with foreign exchange, etc. But if there are designated areas for mining, then why not? But the government and the experts would have to give you a good answer. The regular Joe like me on the road, I don't think it's wise to say yes or no without being properly informed.
No, I don't think any mining should be done in the cockpit country because it can deplete the natural habitats of some of the faunas and birds that found nowhere else in the world. So that's the reason I don't think any mining should be done there.
No, I don't think mining should be done in the cockpit country, but the better question based on the conversation, is it really the cockpit country? That is really the argument, from what I've been hearing. Is it really the cockpit country? If it is, no. If it is not, then why not?
Boy, Dennis, that backside conversation is frustrating but important.
Yeah. It's important, but you know, I mean, the government has done their study, right? David mentioned the whole thing about Basil Fernandez and what he said. And I get where the environmentalists are coming from, but what they also need to come with is some scientific evidence to counter what has been done. Because unless you do that, then you're really just going to have this he said, she said thing going on.
Absolutely. And I mean, bauxite has had a long history.
Yeah.
You hear 50 years, a 50-year history in Jamaica, and there are other families, there are other communities who will tell you what bauxite has done for their own growth and development. The question is whether or not as a nation we are willing to sacrifice the watershed for that kind of economic gain. Are we compromising the watershed?
And that's a question that we need to answer, because nobody wants to compromise the watershed. But let us get some scientific evidence to show what the situation is. Because one of the greatest negative impacts on the environment is poverty. Look what happened in Haiti. They cut down all the trees and where they live and all that, and it creates a massive problem.
And to be fair, the fact that NEPA is the entity that is to be the watchdog is one of the concerns that some people will have as well. There have been other instances, even with bauxite, where people have accused NEPA of being negligent, of accused NEPA of not being able to do the kind of monitoring work that's required to keep people safe. And so that in and of itself is also going to be a concern that people will have.
But you know, what we should do then is get the information, put it out there and show where NEPA has been faulted, and then you take action based on that. But this anecdotal thing, you know, that you're just talking based on emotions, that's the problem we have. I remember Goat Island. You know, we have a nice island out there now and no development.
It's a habitat for the iguanas. That's what it is though. Let's shift conversations to that matter of real estate in City Kingston. That real estate continues to climb in terms of price, but does it continue to climb in terms of value? There are some who believe that an apartment in Kingston right now is just overpriced.
In US dollar terms, I don't think so. And I think that is it, because there's still a demand at the low level. And if you look in US dollar terms, remember our dollar now is 140.
But the demand is there, but the real estate is not. The kind of price point that you're talking about, where people need to buy homes, where most people can afford to buy homes, that inventory doesn't exist in City Kingston.
It doesn't, and people are going to have to go outside of Kingston. And that's why the roads are so important, because if you can live, for example, in Caymanas and come to Kingston in 10 minutes, why you want to get a house in Kingston?
I'm going to come back to my infrastructure concerns. We have to build out the road network, because right now traffic in Kingston is ridiculous, and the more high rises, the more people are going to be living in that. When we talk about the population density, how do we move them? And water. Right now people still flushing toilet for number 2. How do you put all of these people in these apartment complexes? They're going up higher and higher, 4 and 5 stories. NWC is pushing back and saying, I cannot guarantee that I can pump water to the 3rd, 4th, or 5th floor. Where do you leave those people? To build out a bad pan in them expensive apartments?
We have to develop the infrastructure, definitely. I mean, it's important. I mean, and I think the work that has been done on the roads and what NWC has been doing, I think is, you know, we're all looking forward to it. The only problem with it, I think, was that NWA didn't manage it properly. You know, so they just didn't consider the people of Jamaica when they were doing that.
There is a benefit, certainly, though, to those who would have bought into real estate early, who have those older homes, who have the wide expanse of yard, who can now sell and upgrade.
Yes.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for On Point this week. We've got to say thank you to the very hardworking crew who make this show happen. And thanks to you for always tuning in. Until next week, I'm Patria K.
And I'm Dennis Sean.
See you next time.
On Point was brought to you by Crow Jamaica.